Shows that make you laugh. Shows that make you think. Music that moves you. It could only be one place. Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
It's time for the Bonnie Sher Show, a whirlwind of wit, wisdom, celebrity, and the boomer life. With a little bit of this and a lot of that and so much more you don't want to miss, here's Bonnie.
Yeah, well, hello and welcome. I'm Bonnie Sher. Thank you for tuning in and joining our little chat today. First, I'd like to thank Wayne Cobham for my super duper theme song. Thank you, Wayne. I am Bonnie Sher, your host through this time of celebrity, the boomer life, and type 1 diabetes. Today, my guests are comedian, writer, playwright, really funny fella, and author. Today I have with me Steve Bluestein. And we also have our Type 1 co-host from right here in the state of California, and that is going to be Mr. Provencher, who is a member of our T1D community. If you have a question or a comment, go ahead and give us a call at 323-843-2826, or you can follow the hashtag BSherRadio. That's BSHER Radio on Twitter. So now, settle in. And let's say hello to my first guest, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Steve Bluestein. Champ.
Thank you.
My champ.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for asking.
It was my pleasure. So
I don't get out of the house.
That's why I decided to ask you. I was starting to feel badly for you.
No, I don't get out of the house. I do a lot of vacuuming, and that's it.
Well, that makes one of us. I know a bit about you because I did
Been
my
to the
homework.
post office, have you?
That's another story. But what I don't know is, how did you get started in comedy? Did you start as a writer? Did you start as a performer?
No, I was an assistant buyer at the May Company. And
In what department?
Ladies' budget handbags.
I love it. You're not serious.
I am dead serious. And
I know never to take a handbag as a gift from you.
No, quite au contraire. You'll have interior zipper pockets if you get from me. So I was in I hated the job. I absolutely hated it. But I was living in an apartment house in Hollywood that had a swimming pool in the middle, and there were all these apartments, and everybody would congregate around the pool. And I would be down there, and I would be making people laugh. And one of the people who lived in the building was Reuben from the Partridge Family, and yes, Dave Madden. And he said to me one night, there's this new club called the Comedy Store. You should go down because you could do this. I went, no, I'm just funny here. He said, and then also living in the building was Albert Hammond, who wrote It Never Rains in Southern California. And Albert said, come on, I'll take you. So the two of them took me down to the Comedy Store. This is in 1972. And I sat in the audience and I looked at the guys on stage, and I thought, I can do that, because I had been doing that in living rooms all my life. And I had about 5 minutes worth of material, and One was the premise was what would it be like if there was a telephone when the Bible was being written, and it was like, hello, Mrs. Christ. Yeah, this is Mr. Goldstein from the B'nai B'rith Hebrew School. Listen, you're gonna have to come and pick up Jesus. Yeah, well, he's been walking on water again. No, it's not fair. The other kids tried it and they drowned. So that was stuff that I did in my living room, and I did it at the Comedy Store. And Sammy Shore, who owned the Comedy Store at that time, came up to me the very first time I was on stage, and he said, "You got the sound, kid. You have the sound. Keep coming back." Now, if Sammy hadn't said that, I would have gone out of there and never come back. But he said it, and so I became like one of the core comedians in 1972 that started the whole comedy thing. Me and George Miller and Elaine Boozler and Jeff Altman and a bunch of people you never heard of.
Well, that's why they're not on my show.
Yeah.
Also, weren't you instrumental in the founding of the Groundlings?
Yeah. Well, I was. No, that's a loaded question. Gary
My
Austin.
favorite kind.
Gary Austin is instrumental in founding the Groundlings. It was his baby. I was in the class, the very first class that later went on to become the Groundlings.
Gotcha.
And I worked with Cindy Williams and Terry Garr and Randy Kirby, and it was the most exciting time for me. It was a lot more exciting than after I started working.
I can tell.
Breaking in is more fun than actually working. And I still have those friends from that time period.
I bet you do. I bet you're a good friend to have too.
Except if you ask for money, then you're on your own.
That's my next question. But let me ask you, and so your training was really life in living room and the pool.
Right. And my training was, I learned how to do it at the Comedy Store on stage. And there was nothing that when I started working professionally that could have happened that I had not experienced at the Comedy Store. And for instance, opening night in Riviera in Las Vegas, opening for Barry Manilow, with the entire world there, all the press, everybody. Lady has an epileptic fit in the middle of my act. So I'm talking and I hear somebody say, "Steve, get a nurse." And I think to myself, oh my God, not now, not tonight. "Steve, get a nurse." And so I stopped the show. I asked them to bring the lights up. The woman's having a fit in the front, right 3 in front of me. The paramedics come in, they roll the gurney in, they bring it down to the front of the stage, they pick the woman's body up, they put the body on the gurney, they shove the gurney out the door, they close the door, the house lights come down, the spotlight comes back on, and I'm there going, holy shit, what do I do now? Well, from years of training, I learned that there's nothing I could have done to start doing comedy. So I just looked at the audience and I said, I don't think it's appropriate to do comedy now. Why don't we take a few minute break and we'll bring Mr. Manilow out? And there was huge applause. I went backstage and started to cry because I thought I had blown it in front of the world press. Turns out the world press thought that was exactly what I should have done. I was flown to Philadelphia to do the Mike Douglas show, and I got lots of write-ups. So it was,
that instinct.
Worked. Yeah, it worked well.
Yeah, you're a lucky guy. Who were your influences? Did you have any as you were growing up and into it?
I loved Jack Benny. I loved Danny Kaye. I loved Jackie Gleason. I love Red Skelton. Red Skelton is my, it's my blood. I never met him. That's one of the things I feel badly about. However, It was, oh God, I'm so bad. What? I didn't do it. I didn't touch anything.
I thought it was a cue, and I had boy dancers coming in.
No, it's not. I touched nothing. Don Rickles. It's Don Rickles, who I saw on The Tonight Show and said, oh, that's exactly what I want to do. Exactly. And so I then altered my attitude on stage, and that's when it really took off.
He was something to behold.
He's still here.
Yes, he is. I haven't seen him work, though, in a long time. So, but
I think I heard he's in a wheelchair. I'm not sure.
Another sit-down comic like me. What is it that inspires you to get up out of the bed in the morning? Or in the afternoon?
I have to pee.
He's old. What else?
Well, in the old days, it was looking for work. But I'm basically retired now. So writing is the thing that I write every morning around.
Are you always writing on the same project? Like, is there a new book that we should be looking for? Or do you hoppy skippy?
No, I can't. I have ADD. I can't do that. I have to do one project to completion. My latest project is called Alzheimer's, the Comedy, and it's.
But I forgot. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's I always try to stretch, and I'm a big believer that emotions are emotions, no matter if you're black or white or green or yellow or whatever. So this play has an all African American cast, and it's an uphill battle because I did a reading in my writer's workshop, and they said, "Steve, it sounds like white people." I said, "Yeah." What's your point? And they said it wasn't black enough, and I went, yeah, I don't understand. So that's my latest project, pushing that one through. And I have a wonderful Judy Elder, who I went to college with, is the most magnificent actress, and she plays the mother, and her husband John plays the father, and there's a wonderful cast of people that I'm really enjoying working in. But it's a long way from done.
How many plays have you written?
7 or 8.
7. Wow. I sure hope to see that one be mounted.
Yeah, so would I.
We'll have a party. Do you think that you have to be born funny? Do you think anybody can learn to be funny?
Well, here's my theory. I believe there are two kinds of comics. There's the comic that's intrinsically funny, like Elaine Boozler, like Howie Mandel, like, I don't know. They're intrinsically funny. They look at things and see the humor in it. I am one of those people, too. I read obituaries, and I see the humor. I read the obituary of the guy from North Face, the outing company, the
North, yeah. I think it's North Face. They don't.
Yeah, North Face. That he died in a kayaking accident, and I thought that was hilarious. I just said, so I wrote a joke about it. And then there are people who are technicians who have learned that if you say 10 words in a row and stop, the audience will laugh. They've learned how to structure a joke. They've learned how to deliver the joke, and they've learned. So there are two kinds. So yes, you can teach someone to be funny, but it's a lot harder to teach the person who's not intrinsically funny.
I would imagine that to be the truth. And sort of along that same line, what makes something funny to somebody and not funny to somebody else?
Well, it's history. the whole thing about writing a joke is you're taking the person down the line, down the road. You're walking down the road. And then at the last minute when you tell them, we're going to the barn, you go to the garage. You go down and you turn left. And when you turn left, that's what makes the person laugh. Now, if the person you're telling the joke to has not had any experience with a barn or a garage, they won't know what you're talking about. And so they won't laugh. Yet the person who can picture the barn and the garage in their mind, and when you make that switch, then they'll laugh. So that's what makes it funny. It's a collection of our history, of our experiences. And the job of the comedian is to paint a picture with words in the mind of the audience that everyone will understand. So I always say, if I talk about my mother, the audience doesn't know who my mother is per se. But if I talk about mothers, everybody knows what, because everyone has a mother or is a mother.
What do you want to be most remembered for?
Oh.
Sorry. I know it's...
What I want to be remembered for? Yeah. That I was a good person. I want to be remembered as a good friend and a good person.
It's a long time till we're going to have to remember about that. But given that you have been in this business for a while now, if a young performer came up to you, what's the best advice you would lay out?
Go home. Comedy today, when I started, I used to hear the older comics go, comedy today, and I go, I'm never going to be like that. I'm just like that. It's hard. I can't watch it. It's unwatchable. They all sound exactly the same. They all talk about the same stuff. They all sound the same because they're learning from each other, and it's like cousins who inbreed. Oh, I almost said the four-letter word.
It's radio. Go ahead.
Cousins who inbreed, and no one has an individual voice or a sound or a topic, and so people. Actors are doing stand-up because they want to be noticed and get a sitcom. When I started, we were all, our joy was sitting down and writing a joke and then going to the Comedy Store at night and trying it out to see if it worked. One example, I was driving through a Laurel Canyon and I saw a sign, it said lobster tails, 50 cents. And I said, wouldn't it be funny if you go up to them and you give the guy 50 cents and he says, once upon a time, there were 3 lobsters. It's just the way I think. And so that night I went to the Comedy Store and I did that. It got a huge laugh. Huge laugh. That's the joy.
Well, speaking of a huge laugh, buy this book. It's so hard to type with a gun in my mouth. Clearly. Yes, this is our author, Steve Bluestein, and I've been reading it, not like I know everything, but I do know funny, and I do know brilliant, and I want to tell you, this is brilliantly funny. And at the same time, there's a pathos that runs through it, which I think is something that's quite remarkable, my very own self, to be able to be as effective in both of those voices. And it's not like the reader is brought down. It's emotion, and being a person who runs on a very emotional track, I'm very attracted to that, to you. But really, ladies and gentlemen, I got my copy on Amazon, and I bet you can too. There's also an outlet called Lulu.
Lulu, Lulu.com.
Je ne sais pas from Lulu, but I can spell Amazon. But however you get it, do yourself a favor, get the book. Steve, it's been what? I have a check here for you.
Oh, thanks. It's been
You see how you can get attention. I really want to thank you for being here.
Oh,
with
it was my pleasure.
This has been terrific, and I've wanted to meet you for a very long time. And today I had the opportunity to do that. But before we go, can you please tell our listeners how they can follow you?
Well, I have my website, stevebluestein.net, because somebody bought .com. I don't know what they're going to do with it. They wanted to sell it to me for $10,000, and I said, "Oh, really?" .net, and I'm on Facebook, and I will friend anyone. If Hitler asks to be my friend, I will friend him back on Facebook, and I'm also on Twitter at Steve Bluestein, and I always like to meet new people. And if you have a theater, I have 8 plays.
All right. Well, I want to see each and every one of those 8 plays mounted. And something tells me, because we have a very hip audience.
Oh, yeah?
They want to know it, too. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together one more time for Steve Bluestein.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, before we go to break, again, Steve, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you today, and thanks for coming on the show. And ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Bonnie Sher Show. Join us. Try to learn to speak, Bonnie, before you do radio again. Please join the conversation. You can call us at 323-843-2826 or follow the hashtag BSherRadio. That's # BSHER Radio on Twitter. Coming up, Inside My Blue World, plus a shout out from the soapbox. That's right. Who got it right and who got it terribly, terribly wrong, and should be terribly ashamed. But let's now go to break with one of my favorite tunes. It's really sort of my mission statement, and I'd like the world to understand this about me. This particular tune is recorded by that other singer with the initials BS. That would be Barbra Streisand. And this tune, written by Stephen Sondheim, is Everybody Says Don't. Take it away.
Everybody says don't, everybody says don't, it isn't right, don't, it isn't nice. Everybody says don't, everybody says don't, everybody says don't walk on the grass, don't disturb the peace, don't skate on the ice. Well, I say do, I say walk on the grass, it was meant to feel. I say sail, tilt at the windmill, and if you fail, you fail. Everybody says don't, everybody says don't, everybody says don't, get out of line. When they say that, then, lady, that's a sign. 9 times out of 10, lady, you are doing just fine. Make just a ripple, come on, be brave. This time a ripple, next time a wave. Sometimes you have to start small, climbing the tiniest wall. Maybe you're going to fall, but it's better than not starting at all. Everybody says no, stop, mustn't rock the boat, mustn't touch a thing. Everybody says don't, everybody says wait, everybody says can't fight City Hall, can't upset the cart, can't laugh at the king. Well, I say try, I say laugh at the kings or they'll make you cry. Lose your poise, fall if you have to, but lady, make a noise. around for miracles. That's the way the world is made. I insist on miracles. If you do them miracles, nothing to them. I say don't be afraid.
Yeah, don't be afraid. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Bonnie Sher Show. Joining me in this segment is Ryan Provencher, a member of the type 1 diabetes community from right here in California. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here. Ryan is a member of the T1D, type 1 diabetes community. And welcome, Ryan. And you're living with type 1 diabetes. Can you share with us your story?
Sure. Well, I was diagnosed 22 years ago in 1993. I was 15, and it's interesting. I've never actually asked anybody this, but I was diagnosed in November right after Halloween, and I always sort of wonder if a lot of kids get their diagnosis right after Halloween because of all the candy they're eating. But it was it was sort of one of those times when I was diagnosed. I was a freshman in high school, so all these things were changing in your life. You were now the low person on the totem pole, and now you had this disease that nobody knew about, teachers didn't understand, and everyone had to be educated. And I had to really try to figure it out because I didn't know anything about it. But I was very lucky that I had a family that was great about it with me. And then a few years later, I was one of the first people in my hometown. I was the only person in our city that had an insulin pump. And I was one of the first people in New Hampshire, a very small state, but I was the first person in New Hampshire to get an insulin pump, one of the first. So that was all sort of exciting stuff. And for me, one of the things that I always kind of talk about this with people is that you're always sort of sharing this story with others when you meet them. It's always something new, and I'm always surprised how much people don't know about the disease, and that's why I think it's wonderful you have a show like this, because so often people will say to me, "Oh, well, you're not this and you're not that," and I said, "Well, that's type 2 diabetes." Oh, okay, so you have this other one, right? It's always hard because you're always sort of explaining yourself to others.
I understand what you're saying. I used to be able to make the distinction and say, well, we're insulin-dependent diabetics. But nowadays, so many of the endos are treating their type 2s with insulin as well. So that's really not a distinguishing factor unless unless you really explain it to them. Of course, the difference is you can squeeze all you want on a type 1. You're never going to come up with the teeniest bit of insulin.
Right.
But everybody, then of course the thinking goes, oh, well, all you have to do is give yourself a shot. That was the biggest surprise I got, because it was first of all, there weren't enough people to hold me down long enough, I thought, to make me do that. But at the very beginning, I was the same age that you were. I was also 15, and all of my friends were just getting ready. We were starting to date and going out in groups. And boy, they were ordering cheeseburgers and Cokes or Pepsi and, their fries. And, well, I'll have a green salad with 0-calorie dressing. And I was tough enough to be a teenager, but that, I don't know. Did you have any idea when you were 15 what it was that you had gotten into?
I didn't, and I actually didn't know. I didn't know anything about the disease. So when the doctor told me, I immediately thought it was a death sentence. And then he said, "It's okay." Well, because my blood sugar was 880, so I was about as high as you could possibly go.
That's gold, yeah.
And and then you're sort of scared because I spent a week in the hospital kind of getting the education, getting better. I had never been sick in my entire life. I'd never been sick. I'd never been to the hospital outside of being born. I had never been to the hospital. And so suddenly I was this really healthy kid and now I was this kid that was sick. And I had to, I always tell people it's almost like when you're coming out to people is you have to always share this new part of you with everybody you know. And, there were always these, everyone would sort of ask these questions. I remember someone telling me once, people would say to me, well, you can't give yourself a shot around me. You have to do that somewhere else. I can't see that. Or don't test your blood. I'm going to get something if you do that. So it's all that sort of learning curve that was for a 15-year-old kid is scary. Because, you, as much as you want to believe you have all the answers, you don't.
Right. And I seem to also find that the older I get, the less answers I really do have. I don't know about you, but
right.
There certainly are a number of surprises. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So what has your path been like through high school, through college, to where you're working now and what you're doing? Have you been able to... Well, I guess you have, but sort of fashion a life despite the diabetes or because of the diabetes?
I think it's actually a little of both. When I first got out to LA, I decided that I wanted a job that would have insurance. So because that
means
so
you
important.
Can type.
Yeah. So I ended up getting I wanted to work in the movie industry, and I said that diabetes wasn't going to stop that. I was going to work at a studio so I could have insurance, and I did. I got a job. I worked in marketing for over 15 years out here. I've never had an issue with the diabetes concerned with my job. The one thing that I do tell people that I don't tell people is when I have an interview, I don't make known that I'm a diabetic. I never do. And whether that's good or bad, I don't want anyone having an impression that, if he's got diabetes, then, that's going to be insurance money that we have to cover for him, and we're going to have to deal with all this stuff. So, you don't ever want to hide a part of yourself, but you also say, well, why would I make it known? Why risk a chance?
Well, it is a tough call. No, I hear you. No. I agree with you totally. It's a tough call. I kept my diabetes very quiet for a very long time. But at this point in my life, it's a part of me. It's part of who I am. It's part of Bonnie Sher. So it's something that I'm going to talk about as well. What I'd like to do now, Ryan, is I'd like you to join me and let's go inside my blue world for a couple of headlines that are making diabetes news. I'd like to get your thoughts. Take a listen, please. Sure. Hello, and welcome to the My T1 Group podcast, Inside My Blue World. I'm your host and Type 1 Diabetes Crusader, Bonnie Sher. This is my weekly share, headlines from around the globe and across the net. Some will pique your interest, inspire, or frankly tick you off. But all are topics for conversation and discussion with our diabetes care team and the T1D community. You can find the links on my blog at bonnieshare.com. In this installment, an Ohio family shares their grief to change the laws for the emergency dispensing of insulin. My first headline share is from the television station WKYC. Emergency insulin could have saved man's life. This is a moving account of why the laws must be changed. My second share from Insulin Nation, death by expired insulin prescription, makes the case for allowing pharmacists to provide life-saving medication to those with expired prescriptions in certain circumstances. My last share by way of the Chronicle Telegram of Lorain County, Ohio, reveals some progress. Ohio Senate passes legislation allowing pharmacists to provide life-saving medication. This is my weekly share, and if you are as moved by Kevin Hodenschild's story as I am, find out what the pharmacy laws are in your state before what happens to Kevin happens to someone you know or you care about and who is living with type 1. Visit the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy online at www.nabp.net. Also, like Kevin's Memorial Facebook page. Give it a like and reach out to the Diabetes Partnership of Cleveland, an agency doing great work in Kevin's honor. For those links to these headlines, please visit my blog at bonniesher.com. Until we meet again, may your A1Cs be low and your resilience high. So what do you think?
Well, it's so difficult, especially with people who are struggling with insurance and can't pay for their medications, or their prescriptions have expired and they can't reach their doctor. For people not to be able to get the drugs that they need, especially insulin, is outrageous. And I'm pretty aware that in California we're very lucky that we have pretty strict laws on these sorts of things, and that people are able to get the medications that they need. But as you had said in your report, for people to make sure that they investigate that. And I've also heard, and I think it was mentioned in one of your stories, is that you can get insulin without a prescription. There are certain insulins that you can get. And the question then rises that, well, if you don't need a prescription for some, is it good insulin? Is it the right insulin? Are people getting the right medication information? So it's one of these double-edged sword sort of information as to whether, people are getting what they need to survive.
I agree with that. Not only that, but I don't see that they would necessarily know what kind of insulin they can get. Normally, right. The only kind of insulin you can get without a prescription is one of the old-fashioned quick-acting insulins. So, but any of the new breed, anything like Atlantis or any newer type of insulin other than your plain fast acting is not able to get. I know it's happened to me. I was on the road and I had my bottle of insulin in the little refrigerator, the little bar that they had in the hotel, and it flipped out and it broke and I couldn't get insulin. They didn't care. They didn't give me. There was just, no, it's a drug and they won't release it. But, when I think about it, I don't really know. I'm sure there are other drugs which are emergency drugs other than, like an anti-venom drug for but it's just unconscionable to me that we have such a fight and now they're going to fight us to get what we need to live. Let them test your blood sugar. If they really want to, there are ways that are expedient and pretty darn cheap and easy. Instead of just saying to somebody, no, we're not going to give you life-sparing medication.
I was at a pharmacy, this was years ago, and the prescription had run out, and I said, well, I'm going to need this. Can I just buy this insulin? I have to have it. Can I buy the insulin, and then we'll work out the difference with my insurance? And they said no. Mm-hmm. Said no, we won't give you any insulin. I said, to realize what situation you're putting me in, right? And they said, that's not our problem, sir.
Yeah,
and I said, well, when lawsuits start happening and people are dying, it is going to be your problem.
Well,
and I had to go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
I had the same circumstance with a friend that was having an issue getting it, and I happened to be very lucky at the time. I had an extra vial of insulin, and I was able to give it to him because he had just lost his job. He was in between insurances. This was before the Affordable Care Act. And I gave him a vial of insulin because I had extra, but he didn't know what he was going to do and couldn't afford to buy it all on his own. And that's, I think, the problem that we have with a lot of people.
I absolutely agree. There is on Facebook, there is a group of type 1s. Well, there are many groups for type 1s, but this particular one allows for trading and sharing of supplies, which I think is brilliant. I mean, because who's going to take care of us better than we can take care of ourselves? I was thrilled to hear the news that this is changing now in Ohio, which is where Kevin was living at the time and where his family still resides. There's just too much to worry about to not be able to get to your insulin. So let's hope that never happens to you or anybody you know, love, or care about. Well,
absolutely.
Ryan, I want to thank you for sitting in with me today. And if any of our other fellow type 1s would like to be my guest co-host for an episode, it's really very simple. Write me at bonnie@bonniesher.com and tell me that you'd like to be my co-host, and I'm going to make sure to make that happen. Well, I do hate to end this segment, Ryan. I thank you, but it's time for me to step up on my soapbox, so we'll be in touch with you soon. Thank you for being here with me today.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Look forward to talking to you again. Thanks, Ryan. First, I'd like to give a shout out to a new and unique free service called Medivisor. That's Medivisor. They have already assisted many, many diabetics in receiving the latest of medical science, which is actually relevant to the individual. You answer a few questions, what language you want this in, and the amount of research they've done on what's new in medical science is phenomenal. It's quite concise. It's very easy to comprehend. And as a matter of fact, I've subscribed myself and have recently had a rather lengthy conversation with their CEO. And I really like what they're doing. So keep on keeping on, Medivisor. And take a look. I think you can find them on Facebook. You can Google them. It's Medivisor.org. Now, for my shout down. Shame on the Republican governor from Georgia, Nathan Deal. This is an article that was reported in the Daily Kos. As you might know, the government has mandated that all states make available to Syrian refugees food stamps. And Governor Deal has decided that that law does not pertain to his state. And this is now being tested, this turnaround of the law. last week when a refugee family did arrive and they were denied food stamps. But the state isn't having any second thoughts. The Department of Human Services sent a memo in November ordering employees not to process the applications for Syrian refugees after Governor Nathan Deal issued an executive order telling all state agencies to stop any involvement with the resettlement of refugees from Syria. Miss Graham, a spokeswoman for the state's Department of Human Services, told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that the department will follow the November 18th memo with the newly arrived family. Her quote, "We're just going to follow that process as outlined," she said. Where are their hearts? Well, if you have an opinion, you can visit my blog at bonniesher.com/blog and sound off. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's our show. I hope you return next week for another 50-minute round trip through the land of Bonnie. That's Bonnie, that's the Boomers, and that is the T1D community. Until then, please like the Bonnie Sings Lena Facebook fan page. I'm going to change that name, but I'll let you know what I do. And visit bonniesher.com. I'd like to thank one more time today's guests. And also a note of thanks to Corey Bone. He is the designer at Crown and Anchor Jewelry, and I'd like to thank him for outfitting me with these incredibly beautiful, these are statement earrings, and they do make quite a statement. To find out about how you can get your hands on some Corey Bone jewelry, all you have to do is go to bonniesher.com. You will see a link to Corey. Press on it and go shopping. Okay, then, for my friends, old and new, it probably doesn't come as any big surprise right now what an enormous presence Sammy Davis Jr. was in my life. He was my mentor. He was my friend. And probably is why I have a career at all. And if by any chance there are speakers up in heaven, well then, Sammy, this one's for you. Take us out.
Whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong, whether I find a place in this world or never belong, I gotta be me, I gotta be me. What else can I be but what I am? I want to live, not merely survive. And I won't give up this dream of life that keeps me alive. I gotta be me, I gotta be me. The dream that I see makes me what I am. That faraway prize, a world of success, is waiting for me if I heed the call. I won't settle down, won't settle for less, as long as there's a chance that I can have it all. I'll go it alone. That's how for somebody else if I'm not right for me. I gotta be free. I've gotta be free. Daring to try to do it or die. I've gotta be me. I'll go it alone. That's how it must be. I can't be right for somebody else if I'm not right for me.